Hello and welcome to REAL-ationship Talk, the podcast hosted by yours truly, Teresha Young, relationship master coach, where we have open, non-judgmental, heart-to-heart conversations about love, self-love, self-care, dating and relationships. And for this week's episode, I am being joined by the wonderful Gabriela Blandy. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's I'm really excited to dive into the kind of topics that you have on this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for joining, because I know that this is going to be a very different conversation as well to some of the conversations we've had before, and I really can't wait to start. For everybody who doesn't quite know who Gabriela is, I'm going to let you know right now. So Gabriela is a fully qualified life coach and NLP practitioner. She is a personal and professional development expert with over 15 years experience of working with writers, creative souls, and entrepreneurs. She has also trained in the Shamanic Medicine Wheel with the spirit of the Inca. Oh, that sounds so mystical. I'd love to know more about that. Gabriela has been awarded the Royal Society of Literature V.S. Pritchett Prize and has a master in creative writing with distinction. Her writing has been published in various books and journals, including the Mechanical Institute Review and the London Magazine. She has also been published alongside Sarah Waters and Daphne du Maurier. I hope I've said that correctly, or as best as I could. Maybe you can correct that. In Virago's collection of ghostly tales, Something Was There. Gabriela has hosted hundreds of literary events, both in London at City University and the Bar at RADA, and at the John Osborne Urban Centre, and has spoken on the Creative Writing Masters Programme at Oxford University, UEA, Warwick, Birkbeck and Guildford. You are omnipresent. I love it. Currently, she runs an online community for creative souls who are looking for accountability to achieve their dreams and guidance with their healing journey. Wow, I'm just loving that creative energy that you're so tapped into. It'll be absolutely magical if you could just share with us some of the key highlights of your career and life journey that led you to being and doing all that you do.
Yeah, thanks for asking that one. What comes to me is there's the fact of who I work with and then the fact of what I do. And both of those have been part of the life journey, in that I feel drawn to work with creative souls or people who want to express themselves, because I've also been in that position of wanting to let something that's inside of me out, and also to share that inner world or that inner truth with the external world. So whether it's wanting to share on a level of I'm sharing with friends and family, or wanting to share on a level what I'm sharing with a wider audience, I've had such pleasure and satisfaction from being able to do that, that I'm always drawn to helping people who might be struggling with that, because I also know what it's like to sort of want to express something but feeling held back. So that's for one side of it, the why I help the people that I help. And then in terms of the modalities I use, like life coaching or shamanic work or NLP, to be honest, all of those modalities at one point have been my healing tools. Like, I never set out to be a coach. I never set out to be a leader. I simply set out to heal myself. And I think as many people who are in this practitioner field have also experienced, there comes a point when you feel so liberated by healing wounds or finding new levels of inner truth that you then want to turn around and help other people who are perhaps struggling. So the first modality I learned was the shamanic work. And I just went there, Teresha, just because I was like, I'm a wounded soul. Like, I need help. I need healing. And I remember in the first retreat of training that we did, the way the training is set up is you spend 4 days doing your own work and then 4 days learning the energy healing modalities that are part of the medicine wheel that you can then offer to other people. And I was like, not too worried about the modalities. I haven't got this spiritual magic. I didn't even see myself as someone who was spiritual, but I was like, I'm just here for me.
Yeah.
And I loved the inner work stuff. Like, it was really my first experience of personal development. And I was like, this feels so good. I really enjoyed it. Like, I was having fun. I'm not saying I wasn't like bawling my eyes out,
Yeah.
but I was also like getting so much satisfaction from it. Then when we stepped into learning the practices, I remember sitting with my partner and doing the very first healing modality that we learn, which is simply to cleanse someone's energy field.
Okay.
And in that process, I felt that every single thing that I loved doing was being used.
Okay.
I was being in a space with someone with an open heart. I felt like my imagination was being used in a really productive way. I was having an inner experience that just felt really, really gorgeous, like an internal massage. And my mentor came over after I'd done the practice, and she was like nudging me going, you're a natural. And I was like, oh, hey, listen, look, I'm just here to heal myself.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's what you think. And I think that was the first experience I had, which is the beauty of our wounds take us to learn something which we will then want to then turn around and share with other people. It's like we're coming along this path, but we then want to turn around and be like, who else wants to come along this path? So I would say that's the same with all of the modalities I've learned. And we can, if you feel to, we can go into specific ones that I use, but every single one has been at a point in my own healing journey where I'm like, I need this for me. And then I'm like, damn, this was so good for me. I now want to offer that to other people.
That's absolutely amazing. You said so much there that's really, really making my heart sing. I love the word that you use, an internal massage. Wow, what a descriptive. I know you've got a descriptive background, but what a way to actually describe that experience. You've spoken about wounds, and often it's said that we can label the type of wounds that we're going through. They can say you might be wounded because of rejection or abandonment. It could be injustice or betrayal or even humiliation. When you were able to focus on your wounds, could you identify or label what was a major wound for you that you were looking to heal?
Yes, it's interesting, this idea of labeling, because I think, and I will give an example, but I think there is some benefit in being able to label a wound and give a sense of like, oh, this is because my father was never around when I was growing up, which is one of my wounds. And so I have a fear of being rejected or a fear of being abandoned. I think what's really important is then to move from that labeling to the experience of it. Because what can then happen is that we end up just talking about it. And what's then happening is we are simply reliving the wound rather than what might be referred to as renegotiating it. So beginning to experience it in a different or a new way. And that's really essential for healing. And I only know this because I was stuck in that place of just reliving and reliving. So before I did my shamanic training, I actually saw a therapist, and I saw a therapist for a few years, but it didn't blow me away in any of the ways that shamanic training or life coaching or NLP has blown me away. And I certainly think that there's different modalities that work for different people, but just talking about the story never seemed to help me. It just seemed to embed it. So what I've seen from this, this fear of abandonment or this fear of rejection is that when I come into the body and experience it, it's literally just an internal squeezing. It's a little bit like, for those of your viewers or listeners who've ever eaten oysters, when you have an oyster and you put a squeeze of lemon juice on it, it kind of does that.
Yeah.
And so that was that for me is the experience of this wound. So I'm being abandoned or I'm being rejected, and my body clenches. And the reason it does that is because it doesn't want to experience the pain. Yes. So in clenching, it essentially numbs the pain going through the body. But then what happens as a result of that, I don't get to experience the movement of that pain. And so it traps it inside me. So then what started to happen, and this did play out in my relationships, my body is seeking to release that energy that's tied up in the pain. So it then starts to reenact. It goes into, say, relationships where I can be abandoned or I can be rejected, in order that I allow myself to have a different experience, which is essentially to feel the pain of it and to be open to it and to then let it pass through the body. But for decades, Teresha, I was just constantly because that was all I knew. So that was how it was with my wound of being rejected or being abandoned. I also had a huge wound of pleasing people, so hiding my true self, so really pushing down. And so again, there's so many stories around that of like, well, I was a people pleaser because of this, and this is what my parents expected of me, and that's what my teachers expected of me. And again, it can be useful to get some kind of context. But then when I start to come into the body of this people pleasing, what I experience is an absolute suppression of who I am, my truth. And then, of course, it's no wonder that I was then experiencing depression, because all of my energy is just tampered down. And so in working through that, again, it's been a case of just opening up and allowing like the truth of my energy to come out, and then noticing, oh my God, I'm so afraid at how big I can be in a room. So there's lots of different nuances to it. But yes, just in answer to your question, those are a couple of flavors of the wounds I've had, but also how I found that moving through those wounds has actually been more about breath and body work or meditation or visualization, rather than let's talk it through.
And that's so interesting, because thank you for sharing that, because it's so enlightening. We, or many people, do recognize and identify with the mind-body connection, but we can be so caught up in the mind, in the story versus what actually happened, and we start to create these magnificent stories, and we can stay stuck there. But quite often we don't really think about the reverse, the body into the mind, and how powerful that reverse process can be. So I'm really curious about, so you've spoken about the breath work, the meditation, that requires people to slow down in a world where we might not necessarily want to be slowing down. So did you encounter any resistance to that at first, in terms of slowing down? Because I do recognize that you may have also experienced a little bit of burnout as well, that led you to, well, almost being forced to slow down. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I love the way that you touch on that we can get to a place where it's forced upon us. So there have been, I would say, fluctuations over the last few decades of my life where I've reached a point where I've had to slow down. So in my 20s, which was when I first came to meditation, really what led me to the meditation cushion, and boy was I resistant. I was just like, oh my God, the idea of sitting on that cushion and just being with myself, like I was terrified of it, because I was like, my thoughts are going to drive me insane. Like I'm busy trying to avoid my thoughts. I'm busy trying to be busy so I don't hear this insane internal dialogue. I don't want to be with myself. But it got to the point that, okay, two examples. One was I would be trying to go in at night time to just brush my teeth in the bathroom, and I just couldn't decide. I was so like, wait, should I brush my teeth before putting on my pajamas? Am I brushing my teeth right? Maybe I should brush my teeth for longer? And I was like, dude, this is weird. Like, something needs to happen here. And also, as a writer, reading is a huge part of what I do. And it got to a point where my mind was so busy, I was reading pages and I was just zoning out. And I thought, I've lost the pleasure of reading. And those two, I mean, there were lots of other examples, but I knew of meditation, and I don't know why I put the two together. But I somehow knew that meditation was going to help with this. And I knew that if I didn't do something, I was like, look where it's got to. It's only going to get worse. But I spent a year practicing meditation. I went on a meditation retreat and learned a modality, which was an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And I was so committed to doing it. On the meditation retreat, it was a 7-day retreat, and I think I had a breakthrough on day 5. So up until then, it was just gross for me. I was like literally sitting and swimming in thoughts. I wasn't following my breath. I was literally with my mind, and then like, wait, oh God, I'm supposed to be following my breath, and then giving myself a really hard time for it, feeling really uncomfortable in the body, hating myself, like really being critical about the fact that I couldn't do it, imagining that everybody else was in a state of bliss. And what I didn't know at the time, that was just literally me showing me all of the toxicity in my mind that I was believing.
Yeah.
There was a moment on day 5 when I had this vision, and it was so profound for me. I'd never experienced anything like it. So in the meditation, I was so pained by what I was witnessing in my mind that there was just this moment where I was just like, it was like a physical surrender. Like, I literally can't do anything. This mind is berating me, but I've got nothing. I've just got nothing. And so it was just kind of the equivalent of just like letting the mind have its way. It's like, okay, you knock yourself out. Like, I can't fight you anymore.
Yeah. You surrendered.
And in that moment, I had a vision of Princess Leia from Star Wars. I'm not a particular fan. I don't know why it was her, or I didn't know why it was her at the time. There's a moment in what was the original first Star Wars when she's kind of bending over and she's putting a message into one of the robots. So she kind of has this pose. I don't want to bend over too much because I'm going to go off screen, but she's like bending right over at the waist, and she's holding her hand out like this. And I just saw her doing that behind me. And the thing that she says in the film is, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only help." And actually, it's making me tear up now. Yeah. But she didn't say that in my mind. What she did was she did this, and she said, "With love."
Powerful.
And in that moment, I just felt this energetic shower of love coming down. And it was my first experience of loving the self. I had never experienced that. I'd never known what it was like to have that softness, to have that acceptance. And that, because people are like, whoa, you meditated for a year and it was total hell. Like, what kept you at it? Yeah. And I was like, it was that vision that showed me that there was something to this meditation, and that if I just kept showing up, I would find something. I didn't know what it was. Oh. So yeah, that was my first experience of slowing down. And so anytime after that, I found myself getting, the phrase might be over aroused. So like my head is busy or my body is busy. Again, it's just a sign, like, you've lost your way. You've kind of come back into that panicked or that fearful or that anxious energy. So my meditation cushion is totally my friend. And I think that there's just this understanding now that the very thing that we're afraid to do, which is stop, is actually, I do think it's the truth for everybody on the planet. I don't know, that seems like a really bold statement to say, but I think if we can all be okay with stopping, I think we would be living in a totally different world.
Yeah, I completely hear. It's such a powerful share, and I was getting choked up there myself just with that imagery of the hands coming towards you. It's almost like safe. You are safe. That's how I viewed that. And we want to feel that element of safety in life. There's one of our, and according to Maslow, there's one of our top needs when it comes to human needs, is that element of safety and a bit of certainty and trusting the process as well, which I think is such a wonderful experience that you had. And talking about stopping and slowing down, when you are working with your clients, do you find, and what are some of the common resistance that you get from your clients who don't want to slow down? Are there reasons and justifications as to why they can't do that?
Yeah, very much so, very much resistance. And like you say, the reasons and the justifications. And I think it can be so easy to really get caught up in those reasons and justifications. And I know that from my own experience. I experienced burnout in my business around about 1.5 years ago. And I had the same reasons and justifications, like I can't wind down. And often it's around money. Like if I stop, if I take time off work, like who's going to pay the bills? or a sense of it's boring to stop, a sense of what am I going to do, am I going to do with myself?
Yes.
So what I find really interesting, and again, it ties back to what I was talking earlier about this narrative or this story. When we're coming to this place of stopping or slowing down, what we've got to do is experience what's happening beneath the story.
Okay.
So I like to think of it as layers, like the story's keeping you up here in the head.
Yeah.
And it does kind of feel quite, almost quite sort of fizzy or frazzled up here. Like there's a lot of whirring. And we can be very addictive to that whirring. So the story's all up here. It's keeping us really, really busy in the mind. But actually what starts to happen is when we drop into the body, what we start to feel is an experience of, say, exhaustion. And what can be really amazing is when we do feel that exhaustion, we're like, oh God, it really wakes us up, and we understand what the thoughts have been concealing. So I think that is a sort of simple premise. And my clients, they know that's where I'm at. Like when they start to tell me something, I'm like, let's get beneath the story. And they're like, some of them again are like, oh God, I knew you were going to make me do this. And I know how hard it is, because I remember when I first started doing shamanic work, it was all about like, we can talk so much, but then we've got to find out what the body's doing. And I found that so hard. I wanted to be like, no, don't get me in my body. Like, you don't understand what I'm saying to you. Like, you need to hear more. You need to know that it's different for me. Like, I really can't stop. Like, you may have clients that can wind down, but that's just not possible for me. But because I've been there, I know the resistance. And you actually touched on something when you were reflecting back my Princess Leia experience, which is that safety. So a lot of that is a real indication. If we don't feel safe, we're going to want to keep running. And doing and being busy is our way of running. It's running away from the tiger. So when we come into our body, what we realize is the body is activated. We perhaps have got some shallow breathing. We perhaps feel that our heart is pounding. So we realize we're in a state of stress, or we're in the sympathetic state. So until we calm that down, we are literally not going to want to stop. It's the equivalent of someone who's like running from a tiger and you being like, oh mate, do you want to just take a pause right now? And they're like, are you kidding me? Like,
well, about to be food.
Yeah. So there isn't actually a tiger, but there is a belief that like there is a tiger, whether that's I'm going to run out of money, or bills have gone up, or I need to get more clients, or I've got to reach this deadline. And so the body is in a believed state of their life being on the line. So that's why we are so resistant to stopping and slowing down. And that was literally how I felt a year and a half ago. When I really came into the body, it was a sheer terror at stopping. And that was something that I had to work through, which I eventually was able to connect to a trauma, which gave me some understanding of why that fear was there. And we can go into that if you want to. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it's just first and foremost, it's doing work with the body, breath work, movement.
So we're talking about the body work, because for a lot of people that will be quite foreign to them. Is actually starting to connect with their body. So let's say you was to have a new client, you was onboarding a new client, what would be one of the first steps that you get them to identify how they can connect with their body?
I would say the majority of the people who first connect to me are going to find that very, very challenging. Okay. So it's got to be done really, really gently, because, and I know this from my own journey, I've experienced animosity towards practitioners who are asking me to come into my body. And that animosity is literally like the sort of growl of the wounded animal saying like, don't mess with me, don't come closer. Like, you're asking me to do something that I don't want to do. So it's to really understand that. So we literally just start really, really simply. So it might be that I get them to do a breathwork practice with me. So I've got lovely little breathwork practices and they're quite fun. And we might do sort of 4 to 5 minutes of just breathing in a certain way. And what that does is it creates sensation in the body. Like, it does lots of different things, but one of the things that certain different breathwork practices do is it creates like some kind of internal flutter, some kind of heat within the body, some sort of movement. So then you've actually got something that you can tune into. The other way that someone might experience that is a kind of contrast. So I've had a new inquiry who's come in and they've done a little bit of the breath work and they might say, I don't feel any difference, but what I'm noticing is I'm not thinking about what I was thinking about before I came on the call. Okay. So they might have a first experience of just like the internal chatter has eased. So what I'm really just looking to happen in that first consultation is for them to be like, something was different as a result of doing this practice.
Okay.
And then for some people, they may be resistant to that. And I know about that. Like, the ego or our thought patterns are designed to keep us safe. They're designed to prevent us from going somewhere. And my own example is like, it's such a great example to use because for many, many years, I was resistant to breath work. And here I am now, like fully like, go breath work. It's one of the best things to do.
Me too. Absolutely. I'm such a shallow breather, so I can completely resonate.
So for me, I would never have signed up to a breathwork workshop, but I love doing retreats. So I might go on a yoga retreat or I might go on an ecstatic dance retreat. And then in that retreat, there might have been a morning breathwork practice. And I'd be like, oh God, okay, well, we'll just grin and bear it. Yeah. And then I would go into the breathwork practice and I would do one of two things. I'd either completely zone out. So they would be like, right, we're going to do a breathing modality where we inhale to the count of 4 and then exhale to the count of 8. So I might be like, okay, let's give it a go. And then pretty soon I just zone out. And then suddenly it's the end of the session and I'm like, oh, did I fall asleep? Like, where did I go? The other experience I've had is like a real more extreme reaction. Like, this is so boring and I can't be bothered to do it. Now I recognize those as impeccable resistance. It's my mind saying, I don't want to do this practice because what it's going to unearth. Because what breathwork starts to do is it starts to relax the nervous system. So things start to arise. You start to have new experiences. You start to have releases. And so taking the next step, I was specifically resistant to any kind of breathwork that was around rebirthing. Okay. I used to look at rebirthing workshops and be like, oh, please. Like, is that the extent that we've gone to? Like, do we have to be rebirthed? I just associated it with, I don't know, histrionic women. Again, not realizing that was my ego doing a beautiful job protecting me, saying, do not go there.
Yes.
And so the narrative was really compelling. I was like, I'm not that kind of person. I wouldn't go to a breathwork, a rebirthing workshop. But I was recently at a breathwork festival. So I'd gone to a breathwork session and finally stayed present. I recognized that this zoning out or this I can't be bothered was resistance. And I was like, my meditation cushion has taught me how to be present. I know I can bring that into this session. I'm going to do the breath that we're being taught.
Yeah.
What I experienced was a level of happiness and bliss that I hadn't even come close to touching in a sober state.
Okay.
And it blew my mind. It really showed me, remember I talked about the contrast that the onboarding client might be like, whoa, I feel this now. So it sort of showed me, I was like, if I can feel this from breathing, why am I not feeling this every day in my life? So then I was like, I'm sold. Breathwork is amazing. So then I signed up to go to a breathwork festival. At the festival, I found it really difficult to follow the timetable. So I would just go into tents at the sort of time that things were meant to be starting. I happened to go into a tent that was all about rebirthing, all about birth trauma, all about processes around experience in the womb and experiences of trauma around birth. And I was sitting in that tent and the woman started to talk. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, this is very fascinating. Yes. I'm really enjoying this talk. Like, yes, you know, it's very good. My body was in a fit of tears. I was heaving snot, tears. I was like, my body knows something that my mind doesn't know.
Yeah.
And as she began to explain how important the experience is in the womb for how it sets your nervous system. So she says, if you have a stressful experience in the womb, you're going to be born with your nervous system in stress state as default.
Okay.
And then you're going to have an absolute terror of stopping. I was like, I get it. I absolutely understand why I got to this place of burnout and why I've had these patterns of slowly getting busier and busier and busier, and then slowly having to wind down. Yes. But if I was really honest, I had never fully stopped. I slowed down just enough to then get going again. It was like, let me just slow down enough so I can then carry on as I was.
Yeah.
And it was life-changing, because I then, you know, I there was some stories I knew about my experience in the womb and my birth, but I just hadn't put two and two together.
Yeah.
So my experience in the womb was of a very toxic environment. I was in toxicity, and in fact I was being poisoned by my mother's blood in the womb. And then I was born premature, and then I was put in an incubator. So it explains why I have this absolute need for attachment in relationships, because I'm craving the physical touch that I didn't get.
Yeah.
And also why I have an absolute fear of stopping, because I literally, the first sort of experience I had as a cell in this life was in a toxic situation. So my nervous system didn't know calm. So it's shown me so much, but all of this has come about as a result of going to the modality that I was most resistant to, which was breath work.
Yeah.
And being aware enough to notice, I'm telling myself a story, this is resistance. And being brave enough to come into the body when it's absolutely the last thing to do.
Yeah. Incredible. And this is why we have people such as yourself to help us along that journey and to navigate, because listeners, that people might think, whoa, that's an experience, you know, there really is a journey, you know, how can I feel supported with that? And this is where your work, your great work comes in to help people to feel safe and to navigate that journey, because you have spoken about trauma that could have even started before we were born, started in the womb. So it was something that you actually wrote on a recent post that I wanted to speak to you about. And you said that there's a big difference between acting from trauma and living from truth. And I thought, oh, could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah. So when we talk about acting from trauma rather than living from our truth, the understanding is that in the aftermath of a trauma, which is really simply something that happened to us, which we didn't understand how to respond to. Often people think, well, trauma is about the event. It's about something massive happening, but actually it's about the massiveness that happens within you. So the event could literally be getting a dark look from a teacher at school and just being like, oh my God, I literally feel like that look killed me. I feel so afraid about what's going to happen. So I think that's really important to understand. We've got an experience of something overwhelming that happens to us. And then what happens as a result is an energy gets locked into the body, because we're like, and then it's all contained. We don't have an opportunity to go, oh, wow, that was intense. And like, let's let it go. Because we don't, you know, it happens at a time that we may not understand what's happening to us, or we may not be in a position to express ourselves. Like if a teacher gives us a dark look, we want to be quiet. We sort of want to bottle it in rather than be like, wow, that really freaked me out, that look, or laughing or something. So trauma can be an acute event, but it can also be something much more subtle that creates an aftermath within ourselves. Now, as a result of that, we have this trapped energy within our body, and our body is always trying to release it in some way. So that's when we might start to display symptoms of this trapped energy. So our body might be like, oh, a way to release it is to like just keep doing, to keep being busy. Okay. It might be that because of this this traumatic experience, we start to narrow what we do in our life. So we start to narrow the friendships that we have because we can't handle having too many friends, or we start to narrow the experiences we have because we get afraid of going somewhere unknown. Like, what if something happens? So what starts to happen is the trauma is essentially defining our personality. We become someone who hates people giving us evil stares, and we're really aggressive towards people who have serious looks, judgmental towards serious people, or we become someone who's like, oh, I don't like heights, or I don't like going to busy areas, or I don't like showing up online, which is obviously a lot of the things that I'm dealing with my clients. Like, I like being creative, but I want to keep it to myself. That's just the way that I am. So I think when we find ourselves doing things that we can't quite explain, or saying like, look, that's just the way that I am, like, please don't meddle with it, and we're very protective about our routines, we know that we're living from our trauma. We're living from a certain personality that's been defined by experiences that we didn't know how to handle. Whereas when we come to a place where we're living from our truth, what starts to happen here is we start to really understand who we are before the trauma defined us. So what do I mean by that? Let's say we had an experience where our parents split up, and the event was so intense for us that the only way that we could manage it was to think to ourselves, I'm unlovable. Like, that's why it happened. If we come to a place where we're living from our truth, what starts to happen is we've released that energy, we've released that pattern of believing that we're unlovable. And the truth beneath us is, I'm a person that, I feel like I can love myself, or I'm a person who, my truth is that actually I feel like I can give myself generously to people. So we start to uncover a deeper aspect to ourselves, which is often more generous, which is often calmer than we think. Like, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just that kind of person. I'm go, go, go. But when we take away that fear, or we heal the wound, they're like, oh my God, now that I'm living from my truth, I'm actually really laid back. And the truth isn't something that we can figure out with our heads, because I think some people are like, hey, be your authentic self. And we sort of get this idea that living from your truth is about being really loud and being really expressive. But that may be what it looks like for some people, but not for other people. So really living from your truth is coming within and getting a sense of what the body wants without the constriction of fear, or without the constriction of like, what's going to happen if I do this, and really understanding what you truly want to do, whether that is, being like this, or whether that's actually, gosh, I'm a lot calmer than I thought I was.
That's so interesting, because when you were saying things such as, I'm not lovable, maybe that's kind of one of the key reasons that stop people from being creative or being expressive, to be able to communicate their truth, because it's that whole acceptance piece. It's that whole, will I be accepted? Am I loved? There was nothing I saw that you wrote, which was, I am enough. Sometimes people don't actually feel like they are enough for the world, or to express themselves fully. So do you find that when you are working, because I know that part of what you do, your online community, is to help people to achieve their dreams as well, and give them that guidance. So do you find there's some blockages that you find from people when it comes to achieving their dreams, like some common misconceptions that they have about what their dreams are, what they should be?
Yeah, beautiful. I want to try to answer that question, but also to capture on the two things that you observed, which is that I'm not lovable or I'm not enough, because actually the two are often linked. In that, if we're trying to think about what our dreams are, what our purpose is, if we have this belief of I'm not lovable or I'm not enough, it's going to really make that difficult. And I love that you pointed these two things out, Teresha, because when it comes to our dreams, that's about authenticity. That's about having this intuition of like who I'm meant to be and what I'm here in this lifetime for. So this intuition or this intuition or authenticity can actually conflict against what we might call attachment, or this desire to be liked, or this desire to be loved, or this need to be enough. So when we're growing up, if our parents only gave us the attachment, which is attention or love or physical contact as a reward for something, we're going to start to understand I need to give in order to get.
Yes.
And then if we have an experience of, well, I gave this, but I didn't get the attention, I've got to give more, we start to get a sense of what's enough for attention and love and attachment and what isn't enough. And because we live in a world where we can actually choose to rate attachment higher than authenticity. And what do I mean by this? If, for example, you had, men and women living millions of years ago, if we couldn't follow our intuition and we were in the jungle, if we had no ability to follow our intuition, we wouldn't survive.
Yeah.
If we had this feeling of like, wait, there's a wild animal around, and we were like, no, I'm not going to listen to that, we'd get eaten.
Yes.
But now we live in a much safer society, so we don't die off if we haven't developed that real connection with intuition. So what that means is we can favor love and attachment and disregard authenticity and intuition and stay alive. So what that means is we're a society that's favoring being attached to people, and that's why we've lost contact with our authenticity or our intuition, because we've learned to suppress that or not listen to it in favor of our caregivers or our teachers giving us attention, because we're reliant on love, we're reliant on physical contact, we're reliant on our parents to feed us, and so we're not going to want to displease them. So if we're expressing ourselves in a certain way, whether that be an expression of anger, and our parent is like, go to your room, suddenly we're in our room on our own. The attachment has been broken. So we're going to be like, what did I do that got me into this alone space? Let me not do that anymore. So it's situations like that that just cause us to push down our intuitive reaction in the moment, because it's going to mean that we end up being alone. So if we then fast forward to someone I'm working with who is like, I don't really know what my dreams, or like I want to express myself, but I always find myself holding myself back, then I know that what's happening is they favored being attached to expressing their true authenticity. So often then they've got this feeling of, well, I'm not enough, like my truth is not enough to get me love, or I'm not lovable, like if I am my true self, I don't get love. I'm not good enough to get attention. And so then we start to work through, and the irony is what they then discover at the end of the journey is they've got so much within them, and that actually now, like, this in a way is the beauty of the online world, like those people who are authentically expressing their truth, they're just a magnet, because we're just we're dying for intuition and authenticity. It's what we're craving. And the irony there is that then brings us the love and the attachment. So we now get to have both of the things that we want.
One experience, one insight for anybody who is going through that journey in terms of how you can navigate it and reframe the way that you feel about yourself or your beliefs, your paradigms, into something that is completely liberating. One of the words I believe that you said when you first started our discussion was about the whole liberation that you felt when you started to really tap into your healing journey. And what you are alluding to there is a healing journey that you are taking your clients through, which I think is so empowering. And just talking about some of the attachments, I know that for yourself, you've spoken about being a former, can I say former people pleaser, or are you still working on that? But people pleasing, and also the attachments that perhaps you have picked up from the way that you were cared for as a child growing up. Now, I wondered whether some of these tendencies that you had any impact on some of your romantic experiences. And if you would share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely. They completely showed up in those relationships. I think that the relationship arena is a beautiful arena. It's a catalyst really for showing us what our attachment styles are or what our wounds are. And we can see that in what are the common themes in the relationships. And sometimes we can not spot it because we're like, oh, it feels like each relationship was different. And isn't it funny? It's like the friends who are there going, oh my God, you're literally, it's the same guy, but you're like, no, he's completely different. It's useful.
This one's got blue eyes.
Yeah. I think it's useful to remember, as I mentioned earlier, we have this instinctive desire to work through the wound. And so we're drawn to reenacting. We're drawn to putting ourselves back in the same situation so that we can create a different ending. But if we're not coming into that situation consciously, we're simply just going to reenact it. So what I've seen from the relationships that I've been in, first and foremost, is favoring being loved over being myself. Like that's really been the theme throughout. Now that's played out slightly differently. So in some of the relationships, it has involved me just putting on a performance of exactly who I think they want. So the kind of person that they would be infatuated with, the kind of person that they'd be like, wow, you're so amazing. I can't help but love you in an enormous way. And so it's a version of people pleasing because I'm doing whatever I can to please them enough that they literally give me this overwhelming love. And in early relationships, it was sustainable, but it was also exhausting, like this constant performance of being an amazing girl. So I'd be the kind of like, I'm totally laid back. Like I'm the kind of girlfriend who lets her guy do anything. I'm not jealous. Like I don't worry. But inside, I was just tamping down all of that fear of abandonment, all of that jealousy. I was denying it within myself. On the exterior, I looked really laid back, but my beautiful internal organs were just in a state of terror. It also played out in choosing. So in those relationships, what would happen is I would end the relationship because I just got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I need some me time.
Okay. Ooh, interesting. Me time. So
so I was like, I need to just be able to come back and be me for a while. I was not aware of any of this. Like this is only me able to look in hindsight. So I would get bored with the relationship. I'd get bored with them. I would get a sense of like, oh, I don't want to be tied down. But really what was happening is like the real Gabriela was like, I need some airtime here. Other ways that it's played out is that I've chosen a guy who I believe I'm superior to in some way. So they're going to look up to me and be like, wow, you're so amazing. And so they're going to like worship and adore me. And they would never leave me because they're so in awe of me. And I remember the last time that pattern played out, that was a sort of 4 or 5 year relationship. And that was the last serious relationship that I was in. I remember being in the shower and that pattern of relationship ended up with me being left. So I would be the one that got broken up with. I remember being in the shower and literally I have a memory of me like soaping my left armpit, like suddenly seeing this pattern. And I remember out loud saying, all right, babe, how's that one working out for you? And it's this irony that the very pattern that we have to protect us from the very thing we fear actually creates the thing that we fear, because we're trying to create the situation that we're afraid of to enable us to have a different way out of it. So in that moment, I remember being in the shower and for the very first time, in this, like saying to myself, and I can feel the emotion rising up within me as I'm about to say it to you, saying, I call up the part of me that is afraid of being left. And I just felt this rising up of just this tiny, vulnerable, fragile energy. And I was like, I'm never going to abandon you again, because I realized I'd never been present, I'd never been a witness to that energy. And that only when I stopped abandoning that part of me would I then no longer be abandoned, if that makes sense.
Wow, that is such a powerful share. And I can completely hear what you're saying there, Gabriela, because it's almost like there was an identification. You were doing a lot. You wanted to show up for the other person and be laid back, and also be somebody who was, looked upon and say, oh yeah, you're doing so well, idolized perhaps, by somebody else. A lot of people pleasing that you was doing in those type of relationships. And it just feels like a little bit of a disempowered feminine energy state that you may have been in, doing those type of actions. So given all that you've learned and some of the aha moments you had, how do you now allow yourself, or would you going forward, to receive love?
Yeah, beautiful. And yeah, really, really spot on with that noticing of the disempowered feminine state. And that was another result that led to the burnout. I was totally in my masculine energy. I was like badass, do
Yeah.
really valuing that. So I've done some beautiful healing in that area, really tuning into my feminine energy. Funnily enough, when I started to do that healing work, I began to get a lot of inquiries from male clients. I'd worked with a few men over the years, but suddenly I was getting all these inquiries from male clients. So I think it's beautiful to understand that when you do start to do your healing work, the results that you're getting in your life or external events do shift, and you start to see, okay, that's a sort of a reflection that there's an internal change. So I've been single now for the longest time I've ever been single. So up until, I would say, from age 13, I'd never been single for longer than 6 months.
Okay.
Or possibly a year, pushing it, 6 to 9 months. But for the last 4 years, I've been single. And what's really shifted for me is, and the best way that I can describe it is, because I was so focused on being loved, getting into an attachment with somebody, I was just like, whenever I was single, I was like, right, next one, who am I going to find? Like, I'm looking for that love, I'm looking for that attachment. And so I would always have this experience of a round peg in a square hole. And when I look back on it, it was there with every single relationship I went in. I was taking someone who almost fit what I needed and just squeezing it in. So in the last 4 years, that's been my attention. It's like, when I meet somebody, does it feel like a right fit?
Okay.
And there's a real difference here, again, between what I'm thinking and between what I'm thinking. Sorry, between what I'm thinking and between what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Because I can be thinking, well, he's not good looking enough, or he's not kind enough. But actually, the answer is going to be found in the body.
Yes.
Because I think when we rely on our thoughts, if we're allowing our thoughts to determine who we come into an interaction with, that's our ego. So our ego is saying, I want to be with you because you're going to make me look good, or I want to be with you because you're going to allow me to continue to function in this egoic way.
Yes.
Those are just a couple of examples. But when we come into the body, it's like, what's right for the body and on the body's journey? So does it feel safe in the body? Does it feel like a right fit in the body? Does your energy seem to come into mine and feel like a lovely balance? And in a way, the fact that I have been single for the last 4 years, to me, it sort of shows that it's working, because I have met people. And when I've come into the body, I'm like, there's just something here that isn't right for me now. Yes. So sometimes I'm like, well, maybe this could be a slow burn. It could be that I just need to sort of keep being friends with this person to see if we do come into a more romantic alignment, or that person then eventually drifts out of my life. But it just seems to be about patience. It seems to be about continually navigating, and I do mean continually navigating the discomfort of being alone, because there is a fear there. There's a fear, I'll always be alone, I'm going to die alone. So it's like navigating my deep need for love,
Yeah.
And, you know, continually healing that when it arises in my body, like the despair of not being loved, the despair of not being seen by a man, but also understanding that if I'm not coming into relationship with someone, that I'm doing it in a better way, or I'm doing it in a way that's more aligned with my truth, and really waiting for that right fit to come along.
Oh gosh, I so get that. Especially the parts that you're saying about maybe the fear of loneliness. Is this my forever? No, am I going to be single forever? Although you are in a place where, are you accepting of that? Let's just say that you were single forever and you didn't quite fit or find a person who was to fit for you. Are you accepting of that? How do you feel?
Lovely question. When I notice something that could then impact the growth that I'm making in this life, I'm like, right, let me take this into one of my practices. So yes,
Okay.
I did notice this fear of being alone, and I thought, if that fear goes unwitnessed or goes unresolved, it's going to make me want to just grab anybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember I have a practice of shamanic fire. I find it so illuminating. When I want to come to a renegotiation of a pattern, fire can be a really powerful practice to use, because what it does is it helps to really release old energy. But what it also does is it brings in a new energy. So it's not only going to release the fear of being alone, it's going to give you a different experience. And again, you can't think it out. You can't be like, well, I suspect the new experience I'm going to get from this fire. There's sometimes you're like, whoa, you couldn't have made that up. But sometimes it's like, that's not what I expected. But you always get what you need.
Yes.
So I came into fire with this question of like, I want to release this fear of being alone, and I want to have a new experience, and not knowing what it is. And yeah, this is a great example of like, not quite what I expected.
Yeah.
So when I was holding fire, I had a vision, and this often happens, like when you're doing energetic work. Sometimes people have memories, or sometimes people have vision. So it may not be a memory, but it's more like a symbolic vision to give you a sense of like, oh, I kind of get where this fear came from. So I had a vision of me like wearing threadbare rags underneath a bridge in the pouring rain. And I was like, that symbolizes my fear of being alone. Like, I'm so alone that I'm cold, I'm outdoors, it's raining, and I'm probably just going to die. So I was like, yeah, no wonder I've got a real fear of that. But it also helped me understand that fear is far more extreme than the reality. Like, being single is very different to being under a bridge
with a tornado coming or something like that to sweep you away.
Yeah. So it helped me kind of really begin to self-regulate this idea of like, it feels different to imagine being alone. So I was like, okay, I'm releasing the terror of being alone, because it doesn't associate with being destitute and about to die from the elements. And then I started to come into this kind of like okayness with being alone. And then what started to really come in from the fire was actually a real sense of my power, because it was an understanding of like, giving that power as a transaction. Let me give you a piece of me so that I can have this sense of I'm not going to be destitute. So when I got a sense of that power coming back to me, the experience I had was like, this feels so amazing to be whole, to be complete. I would be happy to continue doing the necessary healing work in this lifetime, so that in my next lifetime, I could meet my twin flame.
Yes.
So I was like, whoa, this is big, like to literally come to a place of acceptance that I may never find that twin flame relationship, which is now what that's what the right fit means to me. It's like a twin flame relationship, and understanding the rest of my life may be about healing so that my next incarnation can have it. But it was a sense of like, it feels so good to be me. That's okay. Now, I don't necessarily feel that way every day, but when I find myself spiraling, I can now self-regulate and come back from the terror and remind yourself, remember how it felt when you felt that power. Remember when you felt so generous to your soul to say, I'm not going to force you into anything in this lifetime, so that you can get what you want, whether it is this lifetime or whether it's next lifetime.
Oh, that's incredible. Such an experience. I love the way how almost you've linked the fire with your twin flame as well, which I will move on to as the next part. What I wanted to actually witness there is it was almost like the closing off of a grief process. You know, the acceptance part, when it comes to the end of the grief cycle, it's kind of the liberation. It's the, okay, this is where we are. You've gone through that whole, could I be lonely forever? What does that mean for me? Maybe a little bit down about it, in denial. No, it would never happen for me. You know, could even get a bit angry by it all. And then you get to that wonderful acceptance stage where it's like, okay. But then also what you're doing is, you know, you're looking at the possibilities. And I think sometimes when we get stuck in the story, it's because we're not actually thinking about the possibilities or the alternatives as to where we are. So tapping into, Gabriela, this twin flame energy that you're feeling, describe to me, what is your personal definition of love? I'd love to know, and I'm sure the listeners would love to know. In a romantic context, obviously.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I've come to a place where the experience of love is where my heart is completely open. Okay. And when I'm in the presence of somebody and I have this open heart experience, what I then sense is a total curiosity for what they're going to do next, which is very different to the kind of love I used to experience, where they had to do a specific something next, or they had to be in a certain way. There's just this open, like, wow, who are you going to be today? Wow, what are you going to say? What am I going to see in you today? What am I going to be able to witness? What am I going to be able to be present with? And like a sort of, like a gorgeous internal giggle almost as to what's going to arise in the moment and what I'm going to have to be with. Yes. So again, it's not a case of like, well, I'm really curious as to what you're going to express, but please express something funny or intelligent. Yeah. Like don't express something crap. No, it's like I just want it, like whatever it is, whether it's you expressing, hey, listen, babe, I'm zoning out. I'm not really feeling this right now. I need some time alone. I'm just like, oh, truth, gorgeous. Yes. So it's just this real large openness in this chest area of just like, I can't wait to see what you're going to offer me in this moment. I would say that's like the core of the love. And then from that comes a sense of excitement of like, if we put our two selves in this situation, what's going to arise here? So that's like what happens when you do stuff together. Like, yes. We go for a 10-mile walk, like, how are we going to express ourselves here? But it's just a total openness to what's going to arise in the moment, and a real fascination.
Oh, no, one of the key words you're saying there is just openness, the ability to maybe be free and liberating. I love that description. So it just feels so freeing. It just feels like there's unpredictability, because it also raises the curiosity. And sometimes actually, this is why relationships can become quite stale and boring, is because it becomes too monotonous and it becomes predictable, and there isn't enough variety in the relationship, because it's almost very certain we do exactly the same thing every single day, and I know exactly what my partner's going to do. I can actually read my partner's mind. I think if you can read your partner's mind, then that's probably a bit of an indication that there's not enough growth perhaps in that relationship as well. You might know your partner very well, but to be able to say, I can predict everything they would do, I think, oh, okay, there needs to be that element of spontaneity, which I absolutely love on what you was describing there when it comes to love. And also just something you mentioned before, and again, you've mentioned in this, was the me time and personal space. And would you say that going forward, that will be something very important for you to embody and embed in a relationship with somebody?
Yeah, I think that the me time is really useful, because it does give you an opportunity to say, have I been being me? I think when you come into that me time, there's reflection time. There's a sense of like, do I feel like I was really far from myself and now I've come back? And then you can be like, oh, well, where did I go? How far from my center did I go? So I think it's very important for that, because let's face it, like, I'm on this healing journey. It's not to say that the next relationship that I enter into, I'm going to be totally acting from my truth and not my trauma. That's the beauty of the relationship arena. It's there to bring up everything that hasn't yet been seen. Yeah. So the me time gives you that time to be like, whoa, that was a pattern that I didn't know was there. Whoa, how have I been behaving for the last week? Totally inauthentic. Let me have some moments to reflect. But it also does give you the space to find out who you are outside of that person's influence. And so I suppose the best way for me to express it is, when you meet someone and fall into a connection with them, up until that moment, you were living your life separately. And so everything that, well, not everything, but a lot of the things that you're drawn to in that person, they developed without you, or they developed before you. And so if they don't continue to have a space where they can continue to develop themselves outside of you, then again, you might get to a point where you're like, I'm not learning anything new about yourself. So the idea of, again, my twin flame, like going off for a month and going on a really deep dive into their personality, and then coming back and saying, oh my God, I know you thought I was like this, but now I realize I'm also like this too. And me being like, let's see, what else are you bringing into this space? So yes, I do really value that separation time as well as the coming together.
Oh, and something you've also, spoken about during the course of our conversation is like noticing the patterns. And I think that's probably that you've done a lot of observing, of noticing the patterns over the years, which helps that self-evaluation, self-responsibility in terms of what am I bringing to the table as well when it comes to relationship, because it does go both ways. Gabriela, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing so much of us today. It's been absolutely amazing.
You're welcome. I've loved it too. I've really enjoyed your questions. I've really enjoyed how you have asked me to really dig in and find the truths and express myself. So yeah, thank you for holding space and for asking such great questions.
I honor and witness you for being vulnerable to share what you have done. It's really, really incredible. Before you go, I would absolutely love if you could leave our listeners with one key message to help them along their journey of love, life, and relationships.
I think for me right now, it's about understanding that there is a huge reservoir within your body of wisdom and truth of really who you are. And for many of your listeners, they may be like, this is the first time I'm hearing this. I've never done anything that has taken me into my body. Some of your listeners might be, oh yeah, I'm kind of resonating with that. So for those, I suppose, who've never done anything that's been about coming into their body, I would say that in terms of being able to navigate the relationship arena, knowing what's going on in your body when you're in conflict with your partner, or when you're feeling uncomfortable with something, with a dynamic that's going on, is such a beneficial tool to have, because we can get trapped up in our heads, paranoid or self-doubtful thinking. But often when we come into the body, we usually just find there's an energetic release that needs to happen, or there's a sensation that just needs the gaze of love. So to explore some kind of body modality, whether that's breath work, whether that's a gentle form of yoga. So I favor yin yoga rather than a dynamic form of yoga, because yin yoga enables you to be in a pose, in a fairly restful pose, but for a considerable period of time. So you start to get comfortable with uncomfortable sensation. And then those of the listeners who are like, oh yeah, like I kind of feel like I am doing a little bit of body work. It's to then take it to the next level. So when you've done body work, it's to then follow it up with journaling. So you're really beginning to translate the experience in the body into words and into language, because then you start to get a real relationship. And it means that what that then develops is, in any given moment, you can just go inward for just a few seconds and then come out and be like, I know exactly what's going on, because I'm able to translate sensation in the body and understand what it's trying to communicate to me. So there's a kind of, if you're just starting out, perhaps explore some breath work or some somatic experiencing or some yoga. If you're on the path, try to explore doing journaling as well as body work, so that you're starting to find words for those sensations.
Oh, what a lovely takeaway. I love how you separated that into two parts. And for anybody who's listening to that and thinking, wow, what if I want to get in contact with Gabriela? How can they do so? Where can they find you? Socials, any links? And also, do you have any future events coming up that they won't be interested in attending?
Thanks for asking that. I have a YouTube channel where at the moment I'm really opening up to document my own healing journey. As I mentioned, this birth trauma. So I'm beginning to open up about that. And I'm really beginning to talk more about trauma. There's lots of journaling exercises there. There's lots of really useful educational videos, as well as more personal share videos. So that's a really great place to start.
Okay.
And also, zipping over to my website, there's a complimentary link. So if anyone's at the point where they're like, actually, just a half-hour chat, or a half-hour moment when I can experience some breath work and just have Gabriela hold space. So there's just a complimentary booking link on my website that some people may be drawn to use.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. And for everybody listening, I will drop all of those details into the show notes, so you know exactly also where to find Gabriela. Once again, I honor and witness you, and thank you so much for your time and your energy today. Thank you.
You're so grateful. Thank you so much for really holding such a professional, intimate space.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. And for everybody who has listened to this episode today, I also want to thank you for your time, attention, and energy. And until the next episode, take great care of yourself and others too.